and welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking all the Dutch Grand Prix fallout. Is this officially the end now of Red Bull dominance? Maybe. We'll be talking about that. We'll be talking about the silver lining for the Williams team as well. Things are not as bad as they seem. And Haas, well, they weren't allowed to leave Zandvoort because of this issue with their past sponsor. All this and a little bit more. So let's get into the news, shall we? And once again, congratulations to Lando Norris winning what was essentially his second race of the season. Yeah, I still can't help. I still cannot help that. It should have been more, shouldn't it? It should have been more. But let's get into our first story. What is going on at Red Bull? So Verstappen has basically said something's been going wrong with the F1 car, as reported by motorsport.com. He reckons this is going to be a must fix. And he says it's an unknown issue with the balance. And he believes, I'm using his own words there, gone wrong with the issues he has with the 2024 car, albeit it is the second fastest car at Zandvoort. So they were the class of the field, as we all know, in the early stage of the season. But what was a dominant, and just by a bit, but the most dominant victory so far this year has not come from Red Bull. It's come from Lando Norris in his McLaren. Underlined further that Red Bull are struggling more than they obviously were at the beginning of the year. That's a fact. So Red Bull's campaign first started spluttering, I think one of the articles says, when it encountered what was a range of bumpier circuits. For example, the Monaco Grand Prix. But rather than a single weakness, we all thought initially it was bumps and curves, hence Monaco, hence Miami. But Verstappen has come out and said there are subsequent races have gradually exposed further issues to keep this car well balanced. And that normally was the strength of the Red Bull in the past. But this has appeared to be hurting Red Bull, is the tyre wear seems to be a main issue. For example, we saw that in Zandvoort when, yes, Lando Norris, Choke Norris, lost the start, albeit Piastri had a bad start too. Maybe it's that one we can put down to McLaren. Maybe. But then Lando Norris became Chuck Norris come about lap 18 when he took back to Max Verstappen for the lead. But I start to wonder, was that the beginning of the end for Red Bull even thinking about winning the race because of the tyre wear? So he said himself it wasn't down to the first few races, but something in the car made it more difficult to drive, Verstappen said, after finishing 22 seconds behind Norris. He said it's very hard to pinpoint where that's coming from at the moment, and that is hurting, of course, the one-lap performance in their long one. The whole weekend has been the same limitations, he said. I had pretty much the same balance from FP1 all the way to the race, so it's hard to solve at the moment. It seems like we are too slow, but also quite bad on degradation at the moment. That's a bit weird because I think the last few years, just normally, we've been quite good on that. Yes, they have. So something has been going wrong lately with the car that we need to understand and we need to quickly try to improve. It's just not a connected, balanced front or rear. Now, a lot of people have suggested, is this this braking system or this braking tweak that Red Bull allegedly, they've come out and said no, the FIA have come out and said no, had on their car? Albeit, then why does the FIA need to clarify halfway through a rule, the middle of a season, let alone through a rule set, that you can't do that? Neither, I mean, it feels like the FIA are never really honest with us. If you look back at 2019 with their Ferrari deal, which is why people don't believe them. But yes, it probably is a very good chance that is true in terms of they just put it there. But something has happened to that Red Bull car, be it, if not the braking. Some people have suggested that braking would have helped with tyre wear, and it gets taken off and suddenly they're not as good. But, it's a big but, we have no evidence we've got no concrete evidence other than Red Bull's performance. So, is this the end of the Red Bull dominance? Well, at the moment it certainly is. We go into a race weekend not knowing who's going to win. So normally you'd think, yeah, Red Bull are favourites, but now we've got Ferrari on the up. Ferrari, because Charles Leclerc finished third. They were way better than anyone gave them credit for, I think, going into the weekend and even after qualifying. We've got Mercedes that have won, 3 races, and while Verstappen hasn't won one in those 3 races that Mercedes has. So we go into a weekend thinking that potentially 4 different teams can win. However, and here's the part, Horner has said not to panic. No need to panic. Because it's only Norris's second win, says Horner, and insists Red Bull that they are not panicking in respect of McLaren's upturn in form. He said he does know it's an issue, and he said the team needs to improve to fend off McLaren. The reigning world champions, they hold both a lead of 70 points in the drivers and 30 points in the constructors. However, the Milton Keynes squad is now without a win for 5 rounds. That is the longest spell since 2020, and they've admitted its form is alarming after McLaren's most recent win. Now, speaking in the post-press conference, Verstappen, went on to say this weekend was just a bad weekend in general, so we need to understand that. But the last few races, really, they haven't really been fantastic. So, in a sense, that's a bit alarming, which it is. If I'm honest, I mean, he's saying, it's not been particularly great. Christian Horner is saying, don't panic. But the issue is, you've got Sergio Perez did, I guess, the minimum, but you still have McLaren outscoring Red Bull. So if you think the drivers is fairly safe at the moment, it's still got to take something from Lando, but constructors certainly isn't. And Horner also explained that McLaren's improvement, coupled with his team's dip in form, showed the nature of Formula One, how quickly the tables can turn. He said, well, it just shows that things have moved quickly. I mean, we were winning races by 20 to 25 seconds, and Stefano Domenicali was asking us to slow down in the first 5. I think everyone was. He said it could change very quickly, and that means it can change back that way as well. We know we've got an issue. You can hear that Max didn't feel the car was responding to what he wanted. We've obviously got to be able to manifest that into a setup that works well. He congratulated McLaren and Lando, I think, as we all did. We weren't, and they were limited by their strategy. And I think also they're not really talking, he's not talking too much, but also the tyre wear. The tyre wear surely has to be a massive issue as well. But there we go. Red Bull dominance so far has ended. I think we've got to claim that as official now. We go into a weekend, we don't know who's going to win. How exciting is it? What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. So Haas, they've been through the ringer, haven't they? They've settled their sponsor dispute and had their cars released. They were initially stopped from going to Monza. However, they settled a dispute with their former sponsor, and that's which initially threatened to jeopardise its participation in the Italian Grand Prix weekend. The team was forbidden from transferring its equipment from Zandvoort in the Netherlands to, to carry on to Monza, because until it repaid a sum owed to its 2021 sponsor, Ukulele. I always want to say ukulele. It's not that. It's Kylie. Yeah. Well, anyway, Haas has terminated its sponsor with the Russian fertilizer producer initially in the wake of the Russian invasion in 2022. And in June, a tribunal ruled Haas should pay the money that it paid for its period of sponsorship, because it wasn't fulfilled. And they claim that Haas had promised to deliver an example of its 2021 chassis. While the sanctions were lifted on Nikita Mazepin in April this year, other restrictions on doing business with Russia remain in place in the third year since the war began, which Haas has said it's complicated as it attempts to pay their sponsor back. This led them to take action, but now it's all sorted. Thank you very much. Haas are on their way to Monza. And so is this man here, Alex Albon. Now, Williams did have a shocking race. Albon did qualify 8th. He did get disqualified 3 millimetres. Williams have come out and said it's not going to add performance. I don't think it would have added enough performance to not be 8th. He still may have had a solid qualifying. And he was disappointed. He's described it kind of like as a double whammy, but singled out a silver lining. What is this silver lining? Well, they began the race 18th and 19th, following what was a very horrible Saturday from both Alexander Albon and Logan Sargent. When they started with this, and there was always going to be a tough ask to get points. So Albon did say, though, the car is quick. They did try this 2-stop strategy, pitting early to undercut the rivals before going onto fresh mediums late. He said, we were trying to do a comeback, in some ways trying to make up for, obviously, the unfortunate result yesterday. Albon said post-race, we gave it a go. We tried a different strategy, tried to do stuff that other cars were doing. He said we've got the undercut on a few cars, then at the same time got stuck behind a lot of those cars as well during the stint, so we never really showed any true pace. That was pretty much the race. It was a bit disappointing obviously. Yeah, so silver linings for Williams. They were showing what was a fairly solid pace. But what does that make now the Constructors' Championship look like and everything else? Well, I hear you ask. So we've got Max Verstappen in the lead on 295. I don't think I can get that anymore. Norris about 70 points behind on 225. Charles Leclerc 192. Ollie Behrman has gone down, thanks to Pierre Gasly's points, to 15th, but he's still doing better than Kevin Magnussen, Esteban Ocon, Albon, Zhou, Sargent, and Valtteri Bottas, who still remains last, which is a bit of a travesty, isn't it? So Carlos Sainz is still just about in the top 5. It's going to be interesting if Ferrari don't have that uptake in their form, whether Lewis Hamilton and George Russell beat him. I mean, Sergio Perez is still 7th. That's rubbish, isn't it? Alonso 9th, Lance Stroll 10th. Alonso's got double the points of Lance Stroll, and Hulkenberg holding it up there in 11th with Tsunoda and Ricciardo 12th and 13th with 22 and 12 points respectively. In terms of at the top, it is the constructors that is going to look very interesting. McLaren now has 3 wins. Mercedes has 3. Red Bull has 7. Ferrari has 2. But interestingly, Red Bull 14 podiums, McLaren and Ferrari on 12. Red Bull having 8 poles. Fastest laps is fairly even. It's Red Bull, McLaren and Ferrari each have 3 fastest laps, while Mercedes has 4. And it's a McLaren that had 13 double points finishes, which is again, an exclamation mark. In terms of pointless races, Red Bull and McLaren have had a pointless race. I've had no pointless races, but it's both Ferrari and Mercedes have had 1 each. So that's your top 4. That is your fallout then for I was going to say Belgium Grand Prix, but it's not, is it? No, for the Dutch Grand Prix in Zandvoort. We'll speak to you soon. If you like what you see, please give us a subscribe. That would be amazing, and we'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much.